the introduction of Arch Tempered Nu Udra, our Longsword build has improved once again. My damage output has consistently increased while using these new set pieces, but I would also recommend you watch the video in full so you understand how we get this extra damage, as if you play incorrectly you will not see these same benefits. Also, with more big monster hunt updates coming in the near future, I would greatly appreciate if you could subscribe to help me reach 15k subs before the end of the year. Okay, so this is the build I've landed on. After testing, I can confirm it does more damage than the previous builds put on this channel. I'll go through one by one and explain the choices a little bit. It is very important you understand how the build works and get that extra damage that makes the set worth it. As always, your weapon, go for an Artian. I personally enjoy using Blast, however Para is stronger in terms of meta. For the head, we're going to use the Laggy Helm. The 2 inbuilt maximum might gives us a lot of crit, but the real reason we are using 2 pieces of Laggy, which you'll see a bit later on, is for the Leviathan's Fury skill. Throughout our hunt, periodically we will activate the Azure Bolt skill, which gives us a bit of bonus affinity and procs a chunk of extra thunder damage on top. The crit is what we're looking for realistically, because while this build does a very good job of buffing up your raw attack damage, there's a lot of other variants of the build that tend to neglect affinity, which is your critical strike chance. By putting in 2 pieces of Laggy, we pretty much counteract it while still getting the bonus attack that I'll get onto now. So for the chest and arms, we are going to be using the new Arch Tempered Nu Udra pieces. The chest is incredibly good for Longsword. We have 2 levels of inbuilt counter strike. We will end up maxing this out, but effectively we get a lot of attack damage when the skill activates, and on Longsword there's multiple ways we can activate it. We then get the 2 3 slots, which again I'll go over decorations later on, but the more decorations we can put in the better. After all, this is where a lot of build power can come from. But ultimately what makes the new 18 Nu Udra set so good is the unique set effect. The individual pieces other than the chest aren't too great. Now, by having 2 pieces of this build, we're going to deal moderate additional damage while the resentment skill is active. Now, it so happens that the braces come built in with 3 levels of resentment, along with a 3 slot and 2 1 slots. Now, what resentment does is while we have recoverable damage on our health bar, which is the little red bit on our gauge, we're going to be getting bonus attack. When we max this out, which we will do with decorations, this will already give us plus 25 attack while it's active, but now with the 18 Nu Udra set, this is going to be further pushed. And trust me, the difference is very noticeable. And as mentioned earlier, the reason we're not going all in to go for Bad Blood 2 with 4 pieces, because A, the individual 18 Nu Udra pieces aren't too great, at least for Longsword. They also don't have very good slottage, but by doing that you also completely neglect affinity and the crit damage that we could be doing by using 2 pieces of Laggy, for example. But yeah, then speaking of, we use the Laggy Waste, one of the best pieces in game in my opinion. We get a weakness exploit, a maximum might, and 2 2 slots. All of this once again buffing our affinity and giving us a more consistent crit chance output throughout our hunts. So while resentment isn't active, this is going to be bringing our damage up to a good level in between. And finally, we're going to use the Arch Tempered Nu legs. They're a very nice piece, coming with 3 quick sheath, so we don't need to use our 1 slots for that, a built-in agitator for a bit of extra damage, and even more slots, including a 3 slot. Now, since the RNG charm update, it's a bit difficult for me to tell you what talisman to use. After all, the odds of you being able to get my recommendation are extremely slim with the amount of options available in the pool. For the most part, just use a talisman that gives you the best output of skills you have available. For me, I am using one with 3 handicraft and 1 weakness exploit. As you can see, it's not even a rarity 8, but it does the job for me. Naturally, this will impact which decorations we're going to be inserting later on. As you can see, because I have 1 inbuilt weakness exploit here, I will end up maxing out my weakness exploit. But if you had a charm that gives you agitator, for example, you would instead want to replace weakness exploit decos with agitator. You can also use the craftable talismans. The agitator 2 is really great. You can even go for a burst, or if you're feeling extra spicy, go for the power charm 3 to use a latent power. Probably less recommended, but it could be fun. And in terms of decorations, this is what I am currently running. You can also now see a full list of my skills on the right hand side. So if you want to pause the video to slot these in, feel free, but again, I will need to explain some caveats for this build if you want to use it correctly. So for the Longsword deco slots, we are going to be using crit boost to max that all the way out. we increase damage dealt of crit hits by 40% when we do this. It's one of the highest damage scaling skills that we have in the game pretty much, and while our crit isn't going to be 100%, it's high enough that we're still going to see very good bonus from using this. I have experimented with swapping it out for attack boost, because as you can see at level 5, not only do we get a bit of raw, but it also turns into a percentage. From my individual testing, this seemed to have provided a slightly worse result than using crit boost, hence why I'm recommending you just to stick with it. I then also just have a master's touch, which is going to maintain our sharpness. But of course, the important stuff is the decos we put here on our equipment. On the helmet, I'm putting in 1 burst just to get that skill online and active. When we do a lot of damage in a short space of time, we are going to get a buff to both our attack and elemental damage. Counter Strike, again, this is a skill we end up maxing out to 3. So the skill reads that whenever we get knocked back, we get a temporary increase in attack power. However, on Longsword, this does apply if you use an Iron Slash and take damage while doing so. Effectively, what I'm saying is this skill is active pretty much all the time, so we're not going to complain at a plus 25 attack bonus, with the activation time being extended. I'll go over 1 slots in a short minute, so just ignore them for the time being. The counter attack jewel gives us 1 point in Adrenaline Rush. So when we execute a perfectly timed evade, we're going to get another plus 10 attack bonus. And this does trigger when we use Foresight Slash. And as I mentioned with the charm, I am using 3 Tenderizer jewels, which maxes out my weakness exploit. But the only reason this maxes out for me is because I have a point of Wex on my talisman. This is where I say for these jewels, you're going to want to swap in whatever benefits the talisman you have chosen. So if your talisman has Agitator, use Agitator jewels instead to max that out to 5. I personally wanted to use Wex. With the other components of this build, this max level of Wex brings us pretty close to being at crit cap, or at the very least it means we're going to continue consistently critting throughout the hunt. So while resentment isn't active, our damage isn't going to be sacrificed too much. On the waist we put in 2 Fiora jewels, which give us the extra 2 levels of resentment we need to take us up to level 5, giving us that plus 25 attack while we have red health on our gauge. And as I mentioned, other than that, what's left over is the 1 slots. We are currently at a point in the game's life cycle where survivability is becoming increasingly more important. And so these 1 slots should be used for things that are going to give you extra survivability or general comfort skills. Divine Blessing is the best 1 slot skill in the game in my opinion, so I would always recommend using 3 of the slots for that. But then all of your remaining 1 slots, I would recommend swapping in and out depending on what you're fighting. You might be able to tell from the fact I have fire resistance put in, but I started these in just for the sake of fighting 18 Nu Udra. But there's plenty of other great skills: defense boost, stun resistance. The physique jewels can be quite good. It's going to help keep your maximum might online for the extra crit chance. Growth is another one I would recommend pretty much always putting in. It's a little bit of bonus attack and defense as the quest goes on. But yeah, because we use the 18 of doing the legs, we do not need to put quick sheet in. And because we are using resentment, a skill that requires us to have red health bar, skills like recovery up and recovery speed, if anything, take away our damage uptime, so it might not be worth using these. So as I have alluded to throughout the video, we must play this build within certain conditions if we want to maximize our damage output. For that reason, this build might not be for everyone. However, the benefit of us using Longsword is it's actually quite easy for us to reach the conditions we need to reach to maximize this damage. So once again, for the resentment skill to become active, which is one of the biggest components of our damage output, we need to have red recoverable health on our health bar. And I'm sure most of you would connect the dots. For us to have red health on the health bar, we need to be taking damage and not healing it. This is where the build can get tricky for some players. You'll notice in the background footage you're seeing that I'm certainly not playing perfectly throughout the whole hunt, and so there are times you need to make the decision, should I heal? And with 9-star monsters at this point in the game pretty much being able to 2-shot you with everything, if you do drop below half HP you probably should still heal. And you might be thinking, okay, but what if I do play perfectly and don't take any damage at all? Is the build still viable? And this is where I said moments ago, Longsword is extremely good for the resentment skill. That's because there's a lot of attacks monsters can do that even if you land your Iron Slash or your Foresight Slash, you'll still take a bit of extra chip damage to your health. You'll be seeing in the background footage, I am landing my counters correctly, but whether it be because of the AoE splash effect Udra does, or just by nature of it throwing its whole body at me, I'm still taking chip damage, giving me the resentment skill. So even by playing pretty much perfect, you're still going to be gaining the attack damage bonus from this. And when you do, you will see your numbers noticeably increase. And it's not just attacks like that either. There are ways you can inflict fire blight to yourself through bombs, for example, but in general a lot of monsters will also be inflicting you with those blights. So if a monster does poison you, inflict fire blight, etc., if you don't heal the blight itself, you're going to constantly have resentment active. And the beauty of that is you'll still be able to heal yourself using potions, but when your health starts to tick down because of the blight, resentment's going to immediately become active again, even if you healed all the way to max. Your Palico can mess things up a little bit. Likewise, if you play with support hunters that automatically heal, or even in multiplayer, being healed at the wrong time can really thwart the amount of damage we're outputting. So for consistent results, playing in a single player format is probably the most effective way to use the build, but not necessary. Again, because of the crit pieces we've been using, even while resentment isn't active, our damage is still going to be pretty good and consistent throughout the whole hunt. So if anything, while this build is the strongest thing we have right now, or at least some variant of it, I would still recommend you to try the build for yourself, see how it feels for you, and most importantly, see if you feel safe while using it. Once again, it does put you in the danger zone, and there's an aspect of risk tied to using this set. If that risk is causing you to cast too many times and it's causing you to fail quests, then you're probably going to be better off using a previous build here on the channel. And with that being said, I'm going to leave you there for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, if you made it this far and learned something new, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.